8. Charlie Fowler. A mental health therapist in Valparaiso, Indiana, allegedly lost control of her emotions one day in 2018 when she was unhappy with her manicure. According to a police report, 28-year-old Charlie Fowler refused an employee's offer to fix her nails and left without paying her $30 bill. Fowler reportedly told investigators that the salon's employees began banging on her car window while she waited outside the business for law enforcement to arrive. She was accused of dragging an employee with her car as she backed out of the parking lot. Authorities charged Fowler with misdemeanor theft and criminal recklessness. Her attorney argued that the case was a non-criminal dispute over services that should be handled in civil court. He argued that his client didn't enter the salon planning to steal, and that the police should stay out of civil disputes. Unfortunately, though, the outcome of the case is unclear. 7. Taylor Herby. When 32-year-old Taylor Herby found out that her estranged husband was about to be released from jail on bond while facing a domestic battery charge, she became worried for her safety. 35-year-old Joseph Herby was accused of trying to run Taylor's car off the road in Polk County, Florida the day before, and was about to be released on the condition that he didn't own, carry, or use any weapons. Knowing that he had guns inside his home and worried that he wouldn't obey an order of protection a judge had granted her, Taylor went to Joseph's apartment and removed his assault rifle and a handgun. She then turned the weapons over to police, only to be arrested on suspicion of theft. Joseph Herby had only spent about 24 hours in holding after being charged in connection with the domestic violence incident. Yet Taylor was held in custody for nearly a week after taking the guns. She was charged with 2 counts of grand theft of a firearm, along with 1 count of armed burglary for exiting the apartment with the guns. Supporters flooded into the courtroom for Taylor's bail hearing, including Florida State Representative Anna Escamani, who called on the prosecutor not to pursue the case. State Attorney Brian Haas argued against claims that Taylor was afraid for her life and accused her of entering Joseph's apartment with the intention to steal other property. He described her decision to remove the guns as an afterthought and said that she went to great lengths to frame herself as a victim. Taylor and Joseph eventually entered into an agreement for both parties' cases to be dropped on the contingency of a 12-month conditional discharge, which meant that they would avoid any permanent marks on their record as long as they stayed out of trouble and followed certain rules set forth by the court. 6. Demisha Coleman. In a horrifying act of vigilante justice that was captured on camera in December 2022, 19-year-old Darius Jackson and 49-year-old Joseph Farrar were killed outside a gas station in St. Louis, Missouri. Surveillance footage showed a woman later identified as 35-year-old Demisha Coleman approaching the driver's side of a Hyundai Tucson while an armed male accomplice approached the passenger side of the vehicle. Coleman and her co-conspirator allegedly opened the vehicle's front doors with their guns raised. According to police, Coleman opened fire on the SUV's occupants, sparking a shootout in the parking lot. Jackson and Farrar died from their injuries, while a third victim, who was on the other end of the parking lot, survived being shot in the head. Coleman, who had no prior criminal history, reportedly admitted to being the shooter in the security video. She told police that she'd gone to the gas station to track down her stolen car, marking the latest incident in a growing trend of vehicle owners taking the law into their own hands amid a nationwide surge in Kia and Hyundai thefts. Authorities charged Coleman with 2 counts of murder, 1 count of assault, and 3 counts of armed criminal action. Just days earlier, 43-year-old Carlos Morton was fatally shot outside a St. Louis gas station while confronting a trio of teens he suspected of stealing his car. 2 months before the shooting involving Coleman, a man in St. Louis County tracked down a relative's stolen car and opened fire on the 4 people inside, prompting the 4 suspects inside to exit the vehicle and flee the scene on foot. Both the shooter and 3 of the suspected thieves were arrested. And that same day, 2 teens were shot in an incident involving a woman who suspected them of stealing her Kia. The uptick in vehicle thefts has overwhelmed law enforcement in St. Louis to the point where they've threatened to sue Kia and Hyundai. Police have also called on both companies to take responsibility for their failure to install an anti-theft device on certain models of cars, which has played a major role in the dramatic increase in stolen vehicles. 5. Dempsey Walters. A 29-year-old Delaware state trooper named Dempsey Walters has landed himself on the wrong side of the law after allegedly handling a situation on personal terms rather than adhering to the protocols of his job. According to a timeline of events detailed in court documents, Walter's girlfriend called him on the evening of August 21, 2023, and said that a teenager had targeted their home in an apparent game of ding-dong ditch. Surveillance footage from the couple's home showed a young man running up to the house with his t-shirt covering his face and kicking the front door while his friends looked on. The group of alleged troublemakers fled the scene, but were quickly apprehended by law enforcement after Walters called on multiple agencies to track them down. Walters was off duty at the time, but after hearing that the suspects had been located, he drove to the scene where they were being taken into custody. According to State Attorney General Kathy Jennings, Walters dropped his knee onto the head of a young man who was laying face down on the ground while being handcuffed by a trooper. He then allegedly turned his body cam off and punched another suspect in the face, fracturing the teen's eye socket. Jennings accused Walters of exacting his own form of personal justice by embarking on a violent rampage and attacking 2 defenseless individuals. Attorney Sam Davis, who's representing the victims' families, described the incident as a case of state-sanctioned swatting and explained how one of the victims cried out for his mother while being attacked. Davis further claimed that Walters fabricated a story of a home invasion for the sake of pursuing a vendetta and using violence against the victims. He also accused other officers of using excessive force and dumping one of the injured teens off in a secluded parking lot while they convened to get their story straight about what had happened. One of the young men reportedly struggles with ongoing headaches as a result of the attack. And at a press conference, his mother expressed feeling afraid for her family's safety after Walters rallied up his posse with just one phone call. In the end, Walters was charged with felony deprivation of civil rights and felony assault, along with 4 additional misdemeanor counts relating to the disturbing incident. And as a consequence, he was suspended without pay pending the outcome of his case. 4. Fay Higgins. A disabled Canadian man named Gord Evans had been dead for about 4 days by the time his remains were found in the bathroom of his Orilla, Ontario home in 2010. He'd been stabbed 18 times in the neck, back, and chest, and there was a ligature mark around his neck. Suspicion quickly fell on Evans' personal care worker, Fay Higgins, but police lacked any solid evidence connecting her to the case. She was finally arrested, though, after undercover investigators spent months befriending her and eventually getting her to admit to the crime. Higgins reportedly claimed that she killed Evans after someone else came to her accusing him of horrific abuse. She said that she attacked Evans while giving him a haircut and proceeded to torture him for 2 to 3 hours before killing him. The abuse allegations were never proven in court, but Higgins was accused of acting impulsively and allowing her emotions to influence her poor decisions. She pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 14 years. The court granted day parole in 2023 after deeming that Higgins was at a low risk of reoffending. She's required to abide by a strict set of rules, including continued anger management, having 0 contact with the victim's family, and reporting her friendships and relationships with men to her parole officer. 3. Samia Hani Williams. 49-year-old Adrienne Reeves was found shot dead on the floor of an apartment building lobby in Lower Merion, Pennsylvania on New Year's Eve 2021. Just an hour and a half earlier, law enforcement had responded to a call about a domestic incident between Reeves and his girlfriend, Joy Furman, in the apartment building's parking lot. The couple agreed to separate for the night, and the police left the scene. Surveillance footage of the shooting showed an individual dressed in dark clothing walking away from the building with a gun in their hand after firing a single bullet into Reeves' head. Investigators identified the suspect as Joy Furman's daughter, 25-year-old Samaya Hanny Williams. And as a result, they charged her with murder. Williams' defense attorney claimed that his client thought she was protecting her mother when she killed Reeves. The prosecution, on the other hand, argued that even if Williams had acted out of a desire to protect her mother, she broke the law, and nobody is above the law. The young woman pleaded guilty to third-degree murder in order to avoid going to trial for a more serious charge. She was then sentenced to 12.5 to 25 years in prison. At her sentencing hearing, she apologized for her actions and said that she wasn't the monster that the prosecution had painted her out as. The judge acknowledged that Williams had shown genuine remorse, but said that a lighter sentence would depreciate the seriousness of the crime. 2. Linda Goers. Police in Currymuir, Scotland, received an extremely concerning call one day in 2020 from a woman who asked them to hurry to her home before she killed a man she was holding captive. Earlier that day, 40-year-old Linda Goers and a male accomplice had kidnapped a suspected drug dealer at a bus station where he'd been day drinking with friends. The suspects forced the man into Linda's van and drove him to her residence, where she strapped him to a chair and covered his head, face, and arms with duct tape. Goers accused the victim of selling drugs to a young person she cared about, which he denied. Then, a few minutes later, Linda called the police. She later told law enforcement that if they had been doing their jobs, neither she nor the victim would have ended up in that situation. Linda further stated that the police were lucky they arrived at the scene when they did, because she was about to cut the victim's throat and set him on fire. The vigilante mom could have definitely ended up in prison for her crimes, but she was spared from serving any time behind bars in light of the circumstances of the case. While handing down an 18-month supervision order, the judge mentioned how Goers felt morally justified in her actions, but that she had no legal right to take justice into her own hands. He described the outcome of the situation as regretful, noting that Linda had still landed herself in trouble even though she managed to avoid a prison sentence. 1. Lima and Alfred Eunice. In April 2022, a woman accused 20-year-old University of Iowa student Ali Eunice of attacking her on campus, choking her until she blacked out, and stealing her $20,000 earrings. As a result, he was charged with attempted murder, robbery, and theft. Ali was released on house arrest a few months later. He was required to wear an ankle monitor and required his parole officer's permission to leave his parents' home in Sutherland for any reason other than meeting with his lawyer. The case was just days away from going to trial in May of 2023 when Eunice cut his ankle monitor off and fled to Jordan. His American passport had been revoked as a condition of his bail, but he was able to fly using his Jordanian passport. There's no extradition treaty between Jordan and the United States, so he remains on the run to this day. 3 days after Ali fled the country, his father, Alfred Eunice, was caught trying to board a flight to Jordan in Omaha, Nebraska. He and Ali's mother, Lima, were charged with aiding and abetting their son's escape. Investigators found that the couple had sold one of their vehicles for $20,000 a few days before Ali fled. They also rented a minivan and drove Ali to Chicago's O'Hare Airport, where he boarded the flight to Jordan. Prosecutors accused Lima Eunice of turning her phone off before leaving for the airport, and when she returned a missed call from Ali's parole officer later that day, she claimed that he was at home. By then, the officer had received a notification that Ali's GPS monitor had been tampered with, making his mother's story doubtful. Ali was facing up to 60 years in prison if convicted of the charges he faced. Prosecutors had offered him a deal that would put him behind bars for 35 years, But this was apparently unacceptable to him and his family, prompting them to take the law into their own hands. Lima Eunice was found guilty by a jury and received a 5-year prison sentence for her role in Ali's escape. Alfred Eunice pleaded guilty and also faces up to 5 years in prison. He'll be sentenced in late October of 2023. Would you rather win $100,000 in a lawsuit against someone who wronged you but was spared from any criminal consequences? Or see the person serve time behind bars while avoiding having to pay you back for any of the damages they caused? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.